right? When I left patient care, I realized I could do more working behind the scenes and impact more patients than I could directly at the bedside because I was influencing those who were at the bedside.
Hey there, and thanks for listening to the Beyond These Clinic Walls podcast. I'm your host, Julia, a PT turned product professional, joined by my delightful partner in crime co-hosts, Emma.
This is my tribe. This is how I think.
And Emily.
That is the best getting into PT story I've ever heard.
Founders of the Clinician Transition. Each episode, we interview former rehab professionals who have leveraged their clinical skills into non-traditional roles. I invite you to come hear the journeys, follow the career paths, and learn about the opportunities beyond these clinic walls. On today's episode of Beyond These Clinic Walls, Brandy Wilkins returns for the second part of our dual interview. So you might be coming over here from Brandy's podcast episode on Kairos Conversations, and this is the second half. Brandy interviewed me in the first, and now I get to flip the mic around and interview her. So without further ado, please enjoy Brandy Wilkins. Brandy, welcome to this side of the interview on Beyond These Clinic Walls. And welcome to all of our guests, too, that are following the first half. The saga continues over here on the Beyond These Clinic Walls. So it's my turn now to host. And Brandy is being interviewed. And so, Brandy, welcome to this side.
I am so excited to be here. Super excited about our collaboration. So hello to the audience. And I'm just super excited.
Hi, audience. I ate 2 spanakopita's in our downtime. And now I am ready to interview Brandy. I'm very excited. So, Brandy, I have some questions here that I want to ask you, and you've been on our podcast before. Let's plug it right away. You're episode 7. Yeah.
The number of completion.
Yeah. So everyone's going to listen to this, fall in love with Brandy, and then immediately go and listen to episode 7. Since then, that was like a year and a half ago, which is crazy. Time flies. Tell us what you've been up to in the life of Brandy since our last recording. Lots happened.
Yeah. So lots has been going on. So last time we recorded, I was in a director of quality role at an inpatient rehab facility. And I had the unique pleasure of being able to open that hospital, which was a total game changer for my career. And since then, I have moved states from Georgia to South Carolina. I have changed jobs. So a similar role in that it is a director of quality role. But I dropped the risk part of my role, and we can talk about that if we want to. And been working on, the coaching part of my business, and I started a podcast. So much in there. We can go into as much detail as we need to, but I am just in a totally different place today than I was then. And it's been all good.
Yeah. Maybe we can first jump into a little bit about your new role. And you said you dropped the risk, and we can go into that. Tell us what's covered in your current scope. And what does it look like in a day for Brandy?
Yeah, so I'll start by talking about my last role. So it will give people some perspective. In my last role as a director of quality and risk, I was responsible for patient safety, patient experience, medical staff credentialing, risk management, kind of all the things related to quality and risk. And that was because of the size of the hospital that I was working in and the framework that they had the role structured. There was functional outcomes as a part of that. So all of what encompasses keeping patients safe at the hospital. What was really tough for me in that role was the risk part, because I was the face of a negative outcome. So if something unfortunate or unforeseen happened, then I was the face of that, whether that was with the patient and their family, or the patient and their family, or the attorneys, or whatever that was. And for me, that was heavy. Mm-hmm. And I had gotten to a point where I was dreaming about things at night, and it was affecting my sleep. And it was hard because I really liked the people that I worked with, my colleagues, the person that I reported to, I'd work for him all over again. So all of that was great, but just the weightiness of that part of the role was a lot for me. And so when I started looking for a different role, I knew that I wanted some buffer between me and that, right? Because even if the negative outcome was not our fault, right? If it was a natural progression of that person's disease process or something like that, it's still a hard thing for that patient or family or whatever that situation was to go through. And so when I started looking for a different role, I was looking for one that had a little buffer between that. So from a personal balance perspective. And so my new role is still focused on patient safety, but I have oversight over, how do we keep our patients safe? How do we keep them from getting hospital-acquired infections? How do we make sure they have a good experience? So really working with all the different teams at the hospital. But there's actually a risk department. So they handle the risk part and that suits me just fine.
Yeah. I appreciate you sharing all of that because I think a lot of the perspective, and it was kind of my perspective too, when I was moving into a non-traditional career where it was like, all my problems will be solved. But a new job comes with new challenges and ones that you probably don't always foresee. It's not always greener. Grass isn't always greener on the other side. But no, I appreciate you touching on that. And I appreciate hearing how you had the experience in a role and you continued down this kind of career path and you're iterating on it. I feel like that resonated with me in my product roles. Like the first one wasn't a perfect fit. The second one wasn't, there's the common thread of you going into quality of me going into product, but it takes a little time. It's been, how many years have you been practicing non-clinical right now?
10? Oh my gosh, it's been 10 years. And I want to be clear with the audience too. I don't regret taking that role because I learned so much about myself, what I liked, what I didn't like. I learned how to do these things so I can do them or I can supervise other people who do them. So I don't regret it at all.
Yeah.
It was just, I just got to a point where I wanted to do something different.
Yeah. I love hearing that too. And you can always switch it up. You can take a new role. You can kind of pursue a different direction. I love hearing that. What are, maybe kind of touched on it, but some other lessons learned? You're someone who's in this 10-year part from transitioning out of patient-facing care. Do you have any general words of wisdom for us listeners or just lessons learned from that entire part of your career journey?
Yeah, I've learned so much. One thing I've learned is that we are problem solvers. And you touched on this in your episode on my podcast, but we're problem solvers. I think we forget that when we're making that transition into a non-traditional role, we forget all the skills that come with being problem solvers as a therapist, right?
We totally do.
We did that. And then I've learned that in a healthcare quality role like mine, and I say healthcare quality broadly because I think people don't even really understand what that is, and I'll circle back to that in a minute. But in a healthcare quality role, we lead by influence. And so a lot of times the work that we do, we have oversight over, but we don't actually do that work. So we're working with the nursing teams and the therapy teams and environmental services and in the kitchen and dietary and all these different teams who have other priorities. They have staffing needs and they have other things that's top of mind for them. And yet we influence the work that they do. So that then affects the patient. And so anyone going into roles like this needs to know that it's not an authority role unless you're in that type of leadership position. It's really influence and buy-in and rapport and all of these things, which I'm sure is similar in product, right?
That's exactly the same. You have to lead with influence, not authority. Exactly.
Yeah. And so circling back to healthcare quality, I think people don't realize that healthcare quality encompasses all those things that impact the patient, whether you're directly at the bedside or not. And so, for example, in your role at product, if you're working with electronic health records, that affects the patient or affects the person taking care of the patient. If you work in patient safety or the patient experience or health access or health equity or all these different things is still healthcare quality. And I think people don't realize that they can still use their clinical expertise and not be at the bedside.
I'm curious if you had any other of those skills that you're like, oh my God, I know how to do this. This was a skill I do all the time in the clinic. Was there anything else for you that transferred over that you're like, this is comically the same?
Yeah. So the leading by influence. So I worked in acute care, and in acute care, we worked with the nurses, physicians, the whole team. And we had to build rapport with our nursing team. Maybe we want them to have the patient ready for us when we get there to do therapy, right? Or maybe we get the patient up to the chair at the end of our treatment session and they're the ones putting the patient back to bed, right? Or, the list goes on, but they didn't have to do that. Yes, they maybe should because that's their patient too, but there was a lot of building relationships in those type of roles, right? If you're on a multidisciplinary team trying to, improve some sort of process, you're leading by influence. So that's another thing that we do that we don't give ourselves credit for doing. For those of us who have taken students, I'm managing someone else's caseload, right? Now I'm a supervisor of sorts. I take them under my wing. I teach them. I'm an educator, right? We're educators. Yeah. And so there's so many things that we do that we just downplay as if it doesn't matter.
Absolutely. I think part of it too is like just learning the new language, right? Because like if you're managing or you're influencing a care team, like everything you just described there, stakeholder management. And it's just making those like parallels of like thinking, or like with the student, you help them onboard, like onboarding training, like there's so many of those parallels. And part of it is just talking that language and connecting those dots for people. Okay, I want to talk about defining point, coaching and consulting. When we had initially talked back in episode 7, it was just taking off. You had just kind of put some roots in the ground. Tell us where it's at now, maybe some of the inspiration behind it. What do you want listeners to know?
Yeah, so thanks for asking. So defining point started as a way to help clinicians find their defining point out of patient care. Specifically into healthcare quality, because I feel that if everyone leaves healthcare, what's going to be left for our system for my 7-year-old? And so I feel like therapists can still use their clinical skills in a different way without completely leaving healthcare. So that's mostly my focus. So I coach clinicians on how to do that. Through one-on-one coaching, I've done group coaching, resume help, interview help, all of that. And then I'll say most recently, as of September of last year, 2023, started a podcast inspired by you, Miss Jules.
You already plugged mine for inspiration. Now I have to plug yours. No. Brandy also has an awesome podcast that you guys probably just listened to because you were over there before this episode for defining point. And wait, tell me a little bit now about like the mission of that podcast, and it's quality focused, right?
So the inspiration of the podcast, or what the podcast is about, is sharing the journeys of impact-driven professionals in healthcare. So people who have moved away from the bedside but are still making an impact in healthcare, because I want people to see themselves in these journeys, to know that they can do it too. Part of the reason I started it is because people would always ask me how I got into roles that were reserved for registered nurses. And so I wanted them to see that therapists, that allied health professionals, that clinicians other than registered nurses could do these roles. And there are other people doing it other than just me. And so that was the start of the podcast. it's grown into also talking about how do we make healthcare safer. So having those conversations that I feel like no one else is having on, what can we do to make this system of ours in the United States better for our patients, better for our colleagues. And so I interview professionals and have those kind of conversations. And I've learned a lot. That's my favorite part, is getting to know people I would have otherwise never talked to, never met, right? And getting to know their journeys.
Yeah. You asked me this question and we talked about it a little bit, but I want to hear more on your side of what your favorite parts of the podcast are. I was just going to yes and your response of getting to know and talk to these people. But I always find myself being surprised. I always think an interview is going to go one way with someone's expertise or something. And then we touch on so many fun little stops along the way. But tell me some of your favorite things about having a podcast.
Yeah, so that is one of my favorite parts, is getting to know people and hearing their journeys. But funny enough, being the introvert that I am, I like that podcasts are audio. I don't have to be a certain way. I can be relaxed and have fun with my guest and just kind of have this back and forth banter that I hope people feel when they listen to the episode without myself being concerned about, oh my gosh, is my hair in the right place? And does this shirt go with it? Is my lighting right? And, all of that stuff.
Yeah, there are no ring lights in this recording right now. I have slippers on. It's perfect. That is probably one of my favorite things too. I know for content and everything, I should probably be pushing more videos, but I am totally okay with just my audio for right now. It just seems like a big lift for people to see my face, and I don't know.
Oh my gosh, so much editing would have to go in it for me if I was going to do video. Because the video, I do some video now, but it's very raw. It's very unedited. It's very, you can tell Brandy did it.
Yeah.
And so.
Defining Point Coaching and Consulting is a healthcare consulting firm that partners with healthcare professionals to improve clinical care and reduce preventable harm. Defining Point is the principal sponsor of Kairos Conversations, Connecting with Quality, the podcast, which is available on every major podcast platform. The podcast is the place where impact-driven professionals share their career journeys and chat about making healthcare safer. Now, please enjoy the rest of our episode with Brandy Wilkins. When I hear people want to go into product, I'm very excited. And then I want to pull them into product. I usually do a heart screener and I'm like, why do you want to go into products? Tell me more. And then I kind of push them to see if they've done their research. But I get very excited when they have, and then I want to pull you onto my team. So tell me about your attitude to pulling people into quality. Why should people explore that route? Give me your elevator pitch for quality.
You're already doing it. That's my pitch. You're already doing it. You are a problem solver. You think in processes. You lead by influence, and you want to still impact the patient, right? When I left patient care, I realized I could do more working behind the scenes and impact more patients than I could directly at the bedside, because I was influencing those who were at the bedside, right? And COVID really highlighted the challenges in healthcare. And we started having this mass exodus of people out of healthcare altogether. And if that's what people want to do, no judgment. My heart's mission is to keep people in healthcare, because I want there to be a healthcare system around for my 7-year-old when he gets older, for his kids, right? And so I feel like we have such a huge skill set that can do things outside of the bedside while still impacting the patient or impacting those that are impacting the patient. So come to quality. Come to quality. Come. Yes, you. This is your sign.
Brandy will welcome you with open arms.
100%. Come.
Absolutely. She'll pull you right in. From a career standpoint, you and I are both kind of in a similar boat of starting a new role. And anyone, I think, doing a transition and then starting that first role, or any role, really, it can be scary. And there's a lot of unknowns. How has your onboarding experience been? What is some of the feelings you've been feeling through it?
Yeah, it's a I mean, it's a lot learning a new role. Now, the role is similar enough that I know how to do quality. I've been in quality for 10 years. And at the same time, we'll say the higher you get in executive level roles, the less onboarding you get.
Yeah. Yeah. They're like,
Right?
you're self like taught enough. Like you're resourceful enough. You could take it from here. Right. Yeah.
Exactly. I mean, well, they're bringing you in to solve a problem, right? So they're expecting that you can solve the problem. Yes, you need to learn their system and you need to learn their people and you need to integrate yourself into the new environment and learn that kind of thing. But they're expecting you to bring a certain skill set, right? And so there isn't this 6-week checklist and you do this and then till you do the next thing and then we check you off. It's not like that, right?
Yeah.
These are our problems and this is the gaps. Help us to solve them, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And so that part has been a new challenge for me. Because my last role was at a hospital that had just been built from the ground up. It was part of a bigger system, but still a new hospital. And this one is coming into an existing hospital where, everything kind of already exists. And so it's a different challenge.
Yeah.
But
do you feel like you evolved with the last role to kind of take it on? So that onboarding almost felt like it was stretched over those 10 so years of experience, for right now it's been established and you're stepping into it and you're like, holy tamale, I have to play catch up.
No, that's a great point. I like the way you said that. So yeah, my onboarding has been over the last 10 years before I even got here. And I mean, that's a great way of putting it. It's all the things that led me to this point. I could not have done this role without the prior roles, right? I couldn't have come into this role straight from bedside as a PT to this role. It just would not have worked. I would be... They wouldn't have hired me, first of all.
Yeah.
the Brandy 10 years ago, they wouldn't have hired.
Yeah. Oh, isn't that fun looking back and being like, oh, Julia, even like 6 months ago, like, oh, honey, what were you doing? Like, it's fun to see your growth. Sometimes when you feel like you're not making moves on a day-to-day, it's always nice to look back and be like, oh, here I was back then.
Yeah. and our needs and wants and desires change over that time, right? What we thought was important a year ago may or may not be important now, right? Did you think that you would be in the role that you're in now back when you started making that transition out of clinical care 2 years ago? Or 4 years ago? 5 years ago?
Funny enough, that I think I finally achieved, I finally found my spot. Like, this is what, knock on wood too, because I don't want to jinx it. But when I set out from my clinic, this was actually like, if I go here, like if I make it here, this will be like this step in my career. That's when it's time to, okay, you've made it. Now let's like reassess and what's your next big goal to kind of get. So I'm kind of trying to now just like soak it in and be as best I can at this layer and then figure out, okay, what's next on the docket. But I still have a lot of learning to do at this layer before I start thinking there. But
we're super similar because we like to have a goal that we're working towards, right? And but when we make these career changes or even these just lateral moves or job changes, now we become the learner all over again, right? And we're in learning mode. And sometimes it feels like drinking from a water faucet or a fire hydrant. What's the saying? Now I'm trying to do sayings.
Yeah, no, it's like drinking from the fire hose. That one. There you
go. Thank you.
For me, I don't know if this happened to you, like going from a field or an environment context where you are a subject matter expert and then being thrown into a position where you know nothing can be very jarring and very humbling. And how you navigate out of that is going to be how you lean on those problem solving skills. Did you have a similar experience with that? And how did you navigate through it? How did you be the learner again?
Oh my gosh, I'm still navigating through that with my So, I mean, it's learning. I'm really big on visibility and getting to know people, because if you get to know the people, they can tell you the problems, and sometimes they even have the solutions to the problem. They just haven't been able to put the solutions into place, right? So I'm really big on building trust, where they know that I'm on their side and we're on the same team, and I'm not here to just add more work.
Yeah.
Right? How can we partner together to make this outcome the way we want the outcome to be, knowing that we have the same end goal, which is the patient.
Yeah.
And so, but everything else, I'm right there with you. I'm learning as I go. And it is
challenging.
You tap back into something else. Oh yeah, I remember when I did that there. And so how can I use that in my next role? And I think in processes. So if I can write out steps, that helps me.
Oh yeah, that's good feedback. Every other day now I'm getting like these little like light bulbs or flashes of being like, oh, look at that, leveraging that again. Or like, that's how I connect the dots. And it's like invigorating. But then also sometimes I feel like it can be so overwhelming. And you definitely have those like down days too. And like, sometimes it can just feel so overwhelming. And you're like, did I make the right choice? Am I moving in the right direction? I feel like these are just existential questions that people have in general, regardless of career. Not even sure where I'm really going with this statement, but I think more just an observation. Maybe I'm just using you as my therapist.
Come on, bring it on.
I'm like, sometimes it's really hard, but sometimes it is really hard. And I feel like you don't always hear that half of the story with it too. But,
yeah, because I think people think you move into this new role that you have it all together. That's why you got the most, because you have it all together.
Right.
And that is not true. I mean, there are times when I'm like, oh my gosh, what am I doing? and then imposter syndrome kicks in, and I'm like, oh my gosh.
Sure. Yeah.
Are they going to, find me out and think I don't know what I'm doing? And do they, still believe in me? Are they glad they hired me?
Yeah.
All of these
I have
things.
all those same feelings too. Yeah. Okay, good. So this is just our group therapy here. This is perfect. I love this.
Exactly. Welcome to Brandy and Julia's group therapy session. Have a seat on the couch.
I hope people are listening right now, because I feel like a lot of people feel these same emotions. So it's helpful to know you're not alone with that as well.
Oh my gosh. You are not alone. If that's something I could say to the audience, is you are not alone. And there are people out there that will help you if you reach out to them. You are not alone. And if you need to reach out to me, I'm here for you. Healthcare quality and product, they're like peanut butter and jelly.
I feel like they're peanut butter and peanut butter. Like, after hearing you discuss like learning more about what you're doing, and there's so much overlap with what you were just saying. And I was like, yeah, that's what I do in my role too. A lot of it is these people relationships and saying, oh, hey, your team is really looking to get this. This is what you might need from support on my side. And together, both our teams need to reach this. How are we going to do that? Or maybe we have different outcomes, but there's going to be some parallels. And so much of that, I think, is the building trust and that relationship building that you touched on. So I honestly, it sounds like you're the product manager of your squad over there on quality.
Yeah, that's a good point too. A lot of what I do is project management and product management. It's just a different product, right? And the product that you work with, or that other people who are in similar roles to you work in, can still affect the patient. How do we keep our patients safe? How do we provide them access to care? Maybe it's telehealth. Maybe it's being able to reach people in rural communities who can't otherwise get to their doctor or their therapist or the healthcare system. Maybe it's making it easier for the clinicians to provide safe care so they're not documenting all day. There's lots of ways to still do what you do, Julia, and still tie it back into what is it doing for the patient.
Absolutely. That's exactly it.
Yeah.
I feel like as a physical therapist, my product was the patients. But now my product is an EHR system, but I'm solving the same types of problems. I have to get buy-in from other spots. And it's exactly paralleling what you did, which loops it back to the big thing. We're just problem solvers. Figure out how to move your problem solving in different contexts, and you're going to be successful.
Yeah. And if you can figure out how to communicate that on your resume and in your interview, that's where you're golden, right? Because if you can talk about how you are a problem solver for the problems of the company that you're applying for, that goes a long way.
Final wrap up. Any words of wisdoms, parting thoughts that you would like to share with the listeners for this half of the episode?
Yeah, I will say I truly hope people have gotten a lot out of this episode, out of both episodes, really, and have enjoyed the fun banter of it. In terms of parting words, I will say keep your mind open, your options open for what could be next for you. Your career path is not linear, so whatever you thought it would look like 10, 20 years ago does not mean that's how it has to be, and that's okay. You can change your mind. You can try something different. You can figure out what works for you, but really take the time to figure out what you like and what works with your skill set, and then go for it.
And then go for it. I love it. Yeah, everyone, go for it. Get out of here. Go for it. I love it. Brandy, thank you so much for being on my podcast now and doing this joint collaboration with me. It's been a pleasure.
It's been so fun. Thanks for having me.
Thanks to everyone for listening to this episode of the Beyond These Clinic Walls podcast. As always, be sure to follow us on LinkedIn and Instagram at Beyond These Clinic Walls for all the latest updates and episode releases. Make sure to join the Clinician Transition group on LinkedIn and Slack to be part of the networking community for like-minded rehab professionals. Questions, comments, concerns, or do you know someone who might make an excellent guest on our next show? Reach out to us at beyondtheseclinicwalls@gmail.com. And as always, thanks so much for listening.